It's a real treat to be here in New York. We at Brookings, as you know, are based in Washington, but we do several events and public events in New York a year, and we're delighted that this is one. In particular, we're delighted that the Brown Center on Education Policy could help sponsor this. The Brown Center has been part of Brookings for many years and has been path-breaking in independent, outside-the-box research, including on issues like school choice. The Brown Center is currently directed by Russ Whitehurst, who is with us today and will be introduced in a bit. But Russ's own work in the field has been particularly focused on evidence-based educational reform in a lot of the areas that I know that the governor is interested in. So we're delighted to have Russ sponsoring this event today. Today's event is going to focus on two issues, or we'll touch on two issues that are real priorities that cut across Brookings. One is how we advance opportunity for all our citizens, and education is obviously central to that. And the other is how we advance the economic prosperity of the country, particularly through investments in human capital. And those priorities cut across all 5 Brookings research programs. We're delighted to have several of our trustees with us here today. I see Jim Robinson, who will be introducing the governor, and Russ Whitehurst, as well as Jim Johnson and Al Engelberg, and I'm not sure if I see any others out there. Oh, and John Wilhelm, of course, here in the front row. We're delighted that you're all with us today. Lastly, one final word in the spirit of having Governor Christie here. You know, Brookings is proud of our 3 core values: quality, independence, and impact. And we're also proud that in Washington, which is a town that is increasingly polarized, we're a place where both Republicans and Democrats are happy to work, happy to convene. Russ Whitehurst is a living example of that, and the governor being with us today is that as well. So we are delighted to have this event, and with that, I'm going to have Jim Robinson, who is a trustee of the Brookings Institution for 33 years, either trustee or honorary trustee, and has been kind enough to introduce us to Governor Christie, open the event. Thanks.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. Today's events pulls together two powerful forces in this country. And the first is the governor of New Jersey himself, the Honorable Christie. And the second is the imperative to rethink the way that we educate children in America. Now, Chris Christie was sworn in as New Jersey's 55th governor in January of 2010. He was already a very well-known entity in the state, having been the U.S. Attorney General for the District of New Jersey from 2002 to 2008. And as New Jersey's Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer, he earned praise from both parties. He drew national attention and praise for his efforts in battling political corruption, corporate crimes, gangs, terrorism, polluters, whatever was serious enough to come across his radar. His office never lost a single case. One of Chris's finest moments was when he led the team that thwarted terrorist plans to attack the military at Fort Dix. He also earned widespread praise for standing up to the dirty practices of the political elite. His actions made it clear that stealing from New Jersey taxpayers or abusing power would not be tolerated. Today's event highlights one of the governor's top priorities, putting New Jersey's children first by challenging the system, big time. He will describe New Jersey's education reform efforts to create career-ready graduates with higher standards, efforts to provide room for innovation in teaching. The governor outlined his reforms last September, promising to move public education away from an antiquated, ineffective model that props up failing schools toward a system that demands accountability. We're also fortunate to have with us Russ Whitehurst today. Russ is the Herman and George R. Brown Chairman at Brookings and Director of the Brown Center, as Bill mentioned earlier. Previously, he was a Director of the Institute of Education Sciences at the U.S. Department of Education, and his specializations include program evaluation, teacher quality, preschool, and education data systems. Russ will lead the discussion with the audience after the Governor's remarks. Now, before asking the Governor to take the podium, let me add a personal note. Chris and I have a history going back about 6 years. We started off as adversaries. We ended up as friends. He was the U.S. Attorney who imposed a deferred prosecution agreement on Bristol-Myers Squibb. As a board member there, I became the non-executive chairman for 3 years as part of the agreement. And over those 3 years, I had the opportunity to get to know Chris very well. I saw firsthand from him how firm, pragmatic, tough yet fair this man can be. He listens, he quickly understands the issues, whether business, political, or public policy. He is very direct, and he makes things happen. He's a man of great principle, a man for whom I have the highest personal esteem. Chris, the stage is yours.
Good morning. Thank you all very much, and to my friend Jim Robinson, I want to thank him for the introduction and the invitation on behalf of Brookings to be here this morning. Bill Antholis, the Managing Director of Brookings, thank you for giving me a forum to speak today, all the guests who are here and members of Brookings, and also want to acknowledge my Education Commissioner who is here as well, Chris Cerf, who is a veteran of school reform fights here in New York City under Chancellor Klein and Mayor Bloomberg, and now comes to the right side of the river to try to see what he can do in New Jersey as a New Jersey resident to help me reform an education system that is in bad need of real reform. Let's talk first about what this issue really is and what it isn't. This is not an issue about attacking teachers. This is not an issue about saying teachers are bad and need to be thrown out of schools. This is, in fact, exactly the opposite. This issue is about, first and foremost, our children and how much those teachers who really are good and really care about education, how they can be empowered to teach those children and prepare them better for higher education or for a career. Now, everyone in America is acknowledging now this fight. You've seen it manifest itself in a number of different ways, whether it's the movie Waiting for Superman or the movie The Cartel, whether it's Bill and Melinda Gates working across the entire country talking about why this is such an important issue, or whether it's the President of the United States who is speaking, I believe, strongly and firmly on this issue of education reform. This is an issue that should not have with it a party divide, a partisan tone, or a zero-sum result. Everyone can turn out to be winners in this discussion if we do what we need to do, which is to put aside the feelings of adults and put forward the needs of children and the next generation of Americans who will lead this country. So we need to understand first that the issue is much broader and much more important than any one particular political party. And you also have to understand then when you're assessing the issue, well, who could possibly be opposed to this? I mean, in the end, what we're talking about is trying to provide accountability, real accountability, for, if you want to phrase it this way, the production of a better product for the United States of America. You see, the product that teachers produce, I would suggest to you, is more important than any other product that America has produced or will produce going forward. Yet we don't seem to be thinking about this in those terms. At least some folks don't. Now, I've been speaking very clearly and frankly over the course of the last few years about this issue, and I want you to understand why it's personal to me. I was born in the city of Newark. My parents were lifetime Newark residents. My grandparents were lifetime Newark residents, and my great-grandparents immigrated from Italy to Newark. Newark had been the center of my family's existence on both sides of our family, my mother and father, going all the way back to the time when their grandparents entered this country. But when I turned 5 years old in 1967, my parents made a fundamental decision. They decided that my dad, who was working during the day at the Breyers ice cream plant in Newark and putting himself through college at night at Rutgers, and my mother, who was working to help support paying his tuition, decided that the school system in the city of Newark in 1967 wasn't the type of school system that they thought would give their oldest son the best chance to be everything that he could be. And so, with literally no money in the bank, they went to one of my grandmothers and borrowed $1,000, and to my other grandmother and borrowed $1,000, and took that $2,000 and a VA mortgage that my father was eligible for after his service in the Army, and bought a house in Livingston, in suburban Essex County, in one of the most outstanding school districts in our state. They didn't want to live in Livingston. They didn't want to leave Newark. They left for one reason, for myself and my brother, and then ultimately my sister, so that we could have the best public education possible. When I was elected to this job in November of 2009, on election night, it's kind of a crazy scene. You know, and there's lots of people who want to be thanked by the winning candidate standing up on the podium. It's kind of a little bit of a badge of honor if you actually get picked out as one of the people. It's the first sign of importance in the incoming administration. And I thanked 5 people that night. 5. That was it. My campaign chairman, my party chairman. I thanked my wife and children. I thanked my dad, who was there that night. And lastly, I thanked my teachers in Livingston, who I said that night had been the ones who had laid the foundation to make it possible for me to have become the 55th governor of the state of New Jersey. Now, I'd suggest to you, despite all the hue and cry from the teachers union in New Jersey, that someone who has a deep-seated hatred for teachers would not have picked them out amongst all of the literally hundreds of people that were integral in my election to thank that night. And that all the work by some members of the media to try to put me on the couch about what happened to him in elementary school, you know, that he's so angry, you know, would have thanked his teachers if some traumatic experience had in fact occurred. See, it's personal to me because I know this, and I know this in my heart for certain. If my parents had not borrowed that $2,000 and moved me to Livingston, I would not be standing here. If I had gone to school in the city of Newark, I would not be governor. It's that simple. And so now that I have the opportunity to be governor, with a chance to change the state of education in New Jersey, what drives me is thinking to myself every day, how many future potential governors are sitting in classrooms in Newark and Jersey City, in Patterson and Passaic, in Trenton and Camden and Atlantic City who will never have the opportunity to be governor because we were too weak and too timid to tell the truth about a failing education system that serves just some of our children and not all of them, because some in political life are captives of a moneyed special interest that bullies and thugs its way through the hallways of my state house to get whatever it wants. And we stand too afraid to take on that fight, too afraid to speak the truth that we know in both our minds and our hearts is absolute, because we don't want to rustle things up. We don't want to upset a teacher. We don't want to upset, for goodness sakes, their union. To me, ladies and gentlemen, that is an obscenity. It's an obscenity because each life that comes into being in New Jersey is a precious gift from God. And we should care about each and every one of those lives as if they are our own. And that may sound trite or cliched, but think about the results of us not doing those things. We ask ourselves all the time, why is there so much violence in our cities? Why is there rampant drug use in that culture? Why is there rampant promiscuity and premarital sex and teenage pregnancy? I would suggest to you that all of those things can occur when you live in a society that is devoid of hope. You see, hope is one of the most powerful emotions, I believe, along with love, that human beings can feel. And the lack of those emotions drives behavior as well. Children know when they're not getting a good education. They know it. They're bored. They don't care. They're not challenged. And they know what's happening to them, and they are today even more aware of what the world will require of them to be successful than they were when I was a kid. Our society, our culture, our media, the internet throws at them every day what success looks like and what you need to get there. And so these children growing up in these failing school districts, they know that they're getting a lousy education. And that strips away their hope for a better future. And what happens when they have no hope for a better tomorrow? You know, they look in the mirror and they don't see a successful person. They don't see someone with great potential or value. The lack of a good education and the lack of hope that goes along with it strips away self-esteem. And so when you don't look in the mirror and see someone of value, that's when you put drugs in your body, because you want to have that temporary good feeling, because you know that you're facing a life that may not have much of that at all. Why do you engage in acts of violence? Because when you don't see someone with a bright future in the mirror, you have to fight for every little bit you can and do it however you can get away with doing it. And when someone says, but what about the consequences of that? If you don't believe your tomorrow will be any better than your yesterday, the idea of dying at 18 or 19 or 20 or 21 is not nearly as traumatic. When you don't look in the mirror and see someone of value, that's one of the motivations for young women to find affirmation anywhere and in any act. And then we perpetuate the cycle of single mothers childhood single mothers, trying to break a cycle that our education system contributes mightily to in these places. Let's put numbers on the problem. In New Jersey, we have 104,000 children trapped in 200 chronically failing schools today, as we speak. Now, some would say, well, the solution is to spend more money. See, if we just spent a little more money, we could fix the whole problem. Let's talk about that for a second. In New Jersey, in the 2009-2010 school year, the last full school year we had, New Jersey spent $25 billion on our K-12 education system, more than any other state in America. $25 billion. State aid to education, included in that number, was $10.3 billion, and the statewide per pupil spending was the highest in America. Average $17,620 per pupil per year. Overall education spending in New Jersey has increased 343% from 1985 to 2012. With state aid in our 31 neediest districts, these failing districts, nearly doubling as a percentage of the total state budget during that same period.